Welcome to the Hardcore MBA Podcast with your host, Erland Bakke. Would you like to have a free copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Never Work Again? All you have to do is rate, review, and subscribe to Hardcore MBA Podcast on iTunes and email us a screenshot of your review to erland@mroutsource.com.
Hello and welcome to Hardcore MBA. And as you probably know, MBA does stand for Millionaire Business Academy. And the mission is to create 1 million millionaires, because that is how we can make the world a better place. When people live more abundantly, they live better and do better, and everything will work better. That is my belief. Today, I'm really excited because, why not have a millionaire, or even a multi-millionaire on the podcast, seeing as that's what we're talking about. So today, I've invited Sukhi Wahiwala, who took over a family business while he was in his teens, becoming a millionaire at the age of 21 and a multi-millionaire by the age of 25. Now, at this current time, he has 14 businesses. So he owns 14 businesses. He's also a keynote speaker, and he has spoken in front of thousands of people. He has a great mentoring program called the Business Boardroom, and I'm just really excited to have him here today. So, Sukhi, welcome to the call.
Hi. Thank you so much for, wow, what an amazing sort of introduction there. I'm really humbled and impressed by at the same time. Thank you very much for having me on the call.
So I became an entrepreneur when I was 26, and that was because I was fired and I was had to figure out what do I really want to do with my life. And what I realized throughout the years after that was that I really didn't have any idea of what I was doing, because my parents are academics. My mom's a physical therapist and my dad's an engineer. And they wanted me to do the sort of traditional route in life, study, get a job, get a mortgage, all that stuff. And but I was always very attracted to entrepreneurs. And throughout my first couple of years, I was comparing myself to entrepreneurs the same age as me, that were much more successful than me. And it took me a long time to realize and understand that the people that were far more successful than me had been training for about a decade more, because their parents were entrepreneurs and are entrepreneurs. So they'd been sort of trained from the get-go into business thinking, into using your mind and visualization, all these techniques that are important, and also knowing the value of money. So how was it? When your dad was an entrepreneur, your mom as well, or?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, my mum was as well.
So what did they teach you?
Wow, what a lovely question. Okay, so first things first. The true understanding of how an individual is within themselves, I think, is most paramount. Because, for example, you suggested yourself when you were 26 years old, you're comparing yourself with other comparable 26-year-olds who may have been schooled in entrepreneurship for a bit longer than yourself. The key question you've got to understand is that it's nothing to do with how long you've been an entrepreneur or what your particular strategies is, because to be an entrepreneur, in my opinion, it's very sincerely, basically, a focus upon being fearless toward getting an outcome, like a goal, and kind of being a little bit more out of the box thinking, which is what a lot of people think. But going back to the question that you're talking to me about with reference to what my parents shared with me, now, I have really honestly been honored and blessed to be a part of a seven generation strong lineage of entrepreneurs. You could say entrepreneurs is quite a new modern word, but business people, traders. So they have been instrumental in my life in sharing their strategies and structures, but not just the written strategy and structure, but actually from a very young age, I've been schooled in the basic things where a lot of people don't even think about entrepreneurship as a simple trade. So I've understood to trade my time, my thoughts, my toys from a very young age. The focus has been specifically on how I've been schooled with how they've passed the energy on to me, how they've passed the thoughts on to me, was because they've always shared them in the proceeds of saying, this is for your children. Does that make sense? So they've always shared in a lovely way of sharing this information to them. So I'm kind of lucky that I've got 7 generations worth of distilled energy and thoughts and structures and strategies being shared to me. I kind of never knew how not to be an entrepreneur. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I've never really faced the thought that some people are saying, am I an entrepreneur? Can I be?
Right. So
the way I see it as, I don't see those blockages.
Right. So I remember going to the event, Millionaire Mind, with, the T. Harv Eker event, Millionaire Mind.
Yes.
And going through, I think it was like 30, 29, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we're going through our money blueprint. And I realized all these money habits that I've actually inherited from a little bit from my parents, a little bit from my grandparents, aunt and uncle, and I started identifying all these traits that subconsciously I was doing that I haven't really put my attention on. And I think it's really important to realize that we do have like different sets of programming from we're born till our teens, and then sort of pre-adulthood, and we actually keep most of our programming into adulthood from our pre-teens or past teens. I'm not sure what that phase is called, but like our 20s.
Past socialization, and calls it milestones. In accordance with the psychologist Milestone, he points out that you have 4 stages of your mindset. For example, the imprint period from 0 to 7. You have your modeling period from 7 to 14. And you have your socialization period from 14 to 21, and you have a maturity period from 21 to 28. And there are more phases in there, but the first 4 are usually what really people want to focus on. I think if I could just ask you to rephrase that question, so I can actually possibly directly answer one question there. Is it, for example, are you asking me whether I'd had lovely sort of what kind of imprint from my parents have been pushed onto me?
I'm interested to understand how you grew up differently than most people.
Okay, so I've only worked this out in latter half of my life because I was under the assumption that everybody had the same upbringing. Does that make sense? It sounds a bit naive, but it's very honest. I didn't understand how not to run a business or how not to be in business or in entrepreneurship of some kind. So I'm going to honestly say to yourself that probably I think I've relished the benefit with God's blessings, that all of the information that my forefathers have been passed on through my parents have been passed on to us at a very young age. So I don't have the issues around money. I don't have the blueprint around I don't have enough or I can't have it. In fact, I realized in hindsight, because I've studied an awful lot of what's been beneficial to myself post my illness, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, when I decided that I was going to go on a different mission to try and assist and inspire others, inspire the worlds of others. And this is basically when I look back at what I've actually been given. So in a similar way to the question you've asked of how to extrapolate the stages of what I've really understood has been growing up. So I do have a process where I share with people on a strategic and spiritual way. I've got a lot of philosophies like the traffic light system, which I've created, which have been shared to me, but I've named them differently. I just understand what spends are red, what spends are green, and what spends are amber, if you understand, like a traffic light.
Yeah.
So I'm very focused on the intent on what made me spend money.
I remember going to a traffic light party in a nightclub in Edinburgh, but I think the traffic lights meant something very different at that point.
Yeah, I think so. Well, in this context, one of the strategies or one of the structures or philosophy, should I say, that's shared down to myself is always be aware of why you're spending your money, son. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So with that single line of philosophy of beautiful gift from my parents, and I assume obviously at the end of the day I feel as though I'm very blessed to be in this space, so my intention is to share the knowledge with other people. I'm always focused on being present and understanding what my meaning was behind that spend. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's a gentleman called Alfred Korzybski which was a 1930s psychologist who wrote an amazing book called Science and Sanity. It's a pretty hard read, but it's a really good read. A lot of the modern greats have used extracts from that book and repurposed it for current teachings. But in there, he says something very, very simple, and he says, human beings, mankind, we are meaning-making machines. So we are a machine, and we constantly make meanings. That's all we do. So the meaning behind every action can be found. So if I act upon doing something or not doing something, both of them being an action, so if I act upon making money or not making money, or being employed or not being employed, both of those are very clearly actions. A lot of the time, people perceive that not doing something is not an action. Does that make sense? Or not a decision. These are all fed by an undercurrent of meanings. So the key thing that I've been brought up with as a child is understanding my meaning, so I know why I do things, and if I'm in the intent or not. So if I'm aligned with my thoughts and I know that I'm going to get a clear return on investment on something, I can clearly understand that spend would be a green. And this is obviously just a very, very lightly touched explanation of this. And if I'm not too sure why I spent the money, it would be very clearly an amber. And if I'm absolutely sure I should not have spent it, it goes into being a red. So something that's costly doesn't, let's say, for example, I have 3 pairs of shoes and I buy another pair of shoes just for the sake of it. Or I'm just focusing on trying to make myself feel better with spending money. They're all red spends. You can see that there.
Like buying a Porsche would be a red. It's stupid. You're not going to get a return on investment if it's not like a classic. But it's a lot of fun.
But I'm going to share with yourself, I do have a Porsche, so I have to state to yourself that I kind of agree with you, but I'm going to give you another stretch on that if I can.
I have one too. Yeah, I love it.
So it's amazing. So I'm going to stretch you on that a little bit. So to an extent, an industry that I used to be in was in the car audio industry. So for that industry, it was absolutely legitimate for me to get a Porsche, because then what we did is we used the Porsche as a... Do you understand what I'm doing? I'm clarifying the intent behind it, so that we modified the Porsche for audio and sound to sound par excellence, you see. So then we used it as a demonstration vehicle, and the return on investment was exponential. The amount of people that we brought in to the stores and into our brand who had Porsches was amazing, you know. Not only were they Porsche owners, they were Aston owners, and then they became Bentley owners and Ferrari owners likewise. So I've always been brought up with one of the key things that I want to share with, one of the key learnings I've had to share with people is, if I want something, create a business around it. It's just kind of simple.
Right. That's really smart. So what you're saying is, so you bought the exact car you wanted. You designed it. You made it look really cool, appealing, and then you attracted similar types of people.
Immediately.
And they had money to spend on them. Yeah, they would go for the bells and whistles, as we say.
Yeah, but what we do is basically, because everything should have a strategy and a structure. Remember, fail to plan, you plan to fail. So the first thing I did was look at, is there a marketplace for that kind of a vehicle? So I'm not just blindly acting in gluttony. And what I then did is, I'm also a car fanatic, by the way. I love racing. So for me, it was very relevant to my personal life as well as my business life. So then I purchased the vehicle, and I designed on an audio basis, because I'm a bit of a structural guy as well with audio. We designed 3 phases of sound. And in my vehicle, obviously, was going to be stage 3. Yeah, the best of the best. So then when people came in who looked at that vehicle, if they didn't have a Porsche, they aspired to have the Porsche. So they said, can I have the grade 2, grade 1, grade 3, relevant to the vehicle? And if they had a Porsche, they were filled with, would I suggest security? Being honest, or should I say, being assured that if they left their Porsche with me, they'd be looked after in the same way. Does that make sense? Yeah. So in your context, if I was close to you and you went to an audio dealership and they had no Porsche, their demonstration car was an entry-level Mini, you'd think twice about leaving your £100,000 Porsche with them. But on the same token, If you then turned around and you saw a Porsche, a Ferrari, or a Bentley outside, you wouldn't think twice about it. You think these guys know what they're doing. Yeah? So we did know what we were doing, and that was kind of a bit of if you understand, we added massive value to our business by bringing that into an investment for the business.
I actually, I do this as well. I have these bucket list videos. So I've so far done 78 bucket list videos. And
wow.
Of course, they're all paid for by my company because they are part of our marketing.
Yes.
So that, so I've traveled all over the world. I'll do, if I want to drive a certain type of car, I'll pay for that with a company credit card. And then I'll go drive it, and it's all an business expense.
You see?
So you did that with your Porsche. I need to figure out a way to do that. You've inspired me.
Well, thank you very much. My humble journey is to inspire, to create change in the world of others. And I'm hoping that something, at least one thing from this interview will be valuable to somebody. And create some kind of change. At the end of the day, we're here to help. I'm here to serve. I've decided, that I want to assist as many people to get to millionaire status as I possibly can.
So when I was 21 years old, I think I was in my first year of university. I was, it's actually interesting. Like at that point I said, to my best friend, I met my best friend at university the first day, and he said, what do you want to do after you're finished? And I said, well, then I want to start my own company and I want to be a millionaire. And then I kind of forgot that for the next 5 years of university, because they don't really teach you that in school. And I had to get fired to realize that dream again. So basically that was me at 21. You were a millionaire at the age 21. How does that feel?
Compared, since I've learned, since I've been helping lots of people, and I work with over, just under 400 people. So since I started to work with individuals, I think, Erland, what I'm going to share is that I've since learned what it felt like for other people at the age of 21. So in comparison, my suggestion was this, that I think I was just driven on a mission. That's what it felt like to me. When I was about 19 years old, I got given sort of like a secondary gift by my father, in the sense of he kind of challenged me, If I roll this back a little bit, when I was 16 years old, in the UK we have the next step, which is, I'm not sure what it's like equivalents in America or across the world, but in the UK we have an A level, which is post what we call 16.
Right.
So at that age, I had already decided that I was following and pursuing education, but I was also very clearly decided that I was a business person, because that's what I've always been told. Does that make sense from my parents?
Yeah.
And in specific, my mum. My mum was, I think, very instrumental in molding my thoughts, because she always, left me with a very clear vision and understanding that, do you realize you're a Wahiwala and we are business people? So whatever you do, wherever you go, within 3 to 5 years of being in that environment, you will own a company in that environment. Does that make sense? In that niche. So with this
at what point did so was that when you were doing A-levels?
Oh, all my life, to be honest with yourself. So from a young age, I've always been blessed to be shared kind of secrets and knowledge that I'm sharing with other people now, by the way, to try and make me understand and realize my true potential, which is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So I was 16 years old, just to give you an example, and I had decided there was 2 options in front of me. One, that I could stay on at school, which is normal school, and be bound by school hours. So that means going to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:30, coming back at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Or 2, I could take the option of doing the A-levels at A-level. And the benefit of doing that in college, doing the option of taking the A-levels in college, I do apologize. In college, I would have the freedom of my own, where I could come into the lesson, and then after I've completed the lesson, to come away and leave college if I wanted to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I had to take a very deep decision, because at that time I was eager to run my own business. So I took over one of the previously 1967 established businesses of hardware store, and I kind of, in theory, within the first year or so, had family staff members there, family there as well, running it. But I assisted them and I started bringing some new strategies and clarity to the organization. And then by the age of 17, 18, I was very clear on driving that. So just to give you an example, there's obviously no return without hard work. I appreciate the fact that there is an opportunity of automating yourself in the future, which is I'm very versed in afterwards as well, and you are as well. But you mustn't forget that initially you need to put the hard work in to understand the industry, understand the structure. So I used to leave in the morning and I used to go and open the store, and then I would go to college, finish my lesson and come back, collect the lists, go back to college, and then straight after college go and get the stock and the purchasing from other cities.
This podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you.
And then come back and unload, and then price up that night, ready for the next day. So this is used to be my regular routine. The outcome of this was that by the age of 19, I was running an £800,000 organisation, and it was very clearly profitable. I had the vehicle that I wanted. I bought myself in those days a Peugeot 205 GTI, and things were good. I had money in my pocket. I was kind of, in theory, self-made, which was very important to me at the time. Even though I'd taken over a business of the family business, but I turned it around completely. So things were good. And in theory, I think sometimes ego and drive and kind of misdirection can come in place when you have money. So what I was lucky to have was a beautiful conversation which changed my whole outlook in life. My father sort of had a really simple conversation with me. He said, "Yep, you've got the money, you've got everything right, and I think you're doing well for yourself. Well done." Then he said, "Okay, so what next?" And for those of you who maybe in years to come will get to know my father, he's a man of few words. And when he said, "What next?" he just walked away. He just left me in this like little puddle of thought saying, "Okay, so what next? So are you telling me this isn't it? Are you telling me having money in my pocket whenever I need it, being able to drive the car I want to drive, being successful in business and studying and driving a business into growth, look at the genres and that, isn't it?" So he left me with this turmoil, and I'd say within 48 hours, I don't think I slept much that night, the night before or after that, but then I decided, yes, I understand. What next? In the sense of, this isn't it. There has to be more. So I then started re-articulating myself. So I owe my pivot, you say, as I can explain to my father, who's obviously very successful in business as well. So in that context, at the age of 19, 21, I then went on, between 21, I was running 3 companies. So that's the answer to the question, I think.
So what was next was to grow those companies to become multi-millionaire companies, multi-million-dollar companies.
Yeah,
or multi-million pound companies.
Yeah. So basically in property, in retention of property, in net wealth, in sales, in turnover, in wholesale division, that kind of thing. Yes, absolutely. So that was the what next bit, and it really teased me because naturally I'm a driven, D-dominant type person. So as far as I was concerned, I'd made it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The goal was in hand. So that was a naive, young way of looking at things, but then I was re-inspired.
I also think it's schooling. It's like in school you're taught to think of semesters. So you think of a semester from September till December, and then you work for the grades, and then you're done, and then you get a new run at it after Christmas, right? So I think we're very trained to think like goals of A to B or B to A, whatever direction.
Yeah. That's really nice. That's a very valid point. So thank you for that. Yes. And then post that, basically, I stretched myself, and I've never really looked back and thinking, goals are the ultimate. In fact, I have a very strong mission, which leads an infinite goal, if you understand that.
I think for myself personally, it's like business has become, it isn't really about money anymore. It's about becoming really good at it and then adding as much value as I can. And for me, like my fascination in life is around that. Is because I know I'm at a certain level, but then there's people like you that are on a totally different level. And it's fascinating to me. And I view business as a sport. I honestly do. And I look at it as a grading system. Like people starting out are a white belt. People like yourself are a black belt, or like black belt, depending on the martial art we're talking about. but I just love the art of business. That is what I am fascinated by. And that's why I love meeting people like yourself and also sharing the knowledge, is because the love for the sport, I think, is what is going to keep us in the game forever. Do you agree with that? Or
I like your analogy. I think it works it works in a very strong way. Yes, there is a grading there, obviously, absolutely. For myself, I think it's I think sport, for myself, I'm not suggesting for anybody else, for myself, it holds a different meaning. It holds a win and lose culture.
Right.
So for me, it's not really been a win and lose culture. For me, it's about achievement, full stop. So the chase is one thing, but the accomplishment, the satisfaction, and most importantly, the change that I can create in other people's worlds is really fundamental to what I do in business. That's how my business works. But one of the key things I've learned over the years is to set a very clear structure and strategy process around myself, so that if I stick to it, for example, the way to engage me is a set process, and then if I stick to it myself, then my clients or my customers will do the same. So I love the idea of the analogy of the sport and the black belt, because it's a discipline, isn't it?
I think it's a discipline, maybe.
Yes.
It's more like
that's right.
But maybe it's an art more than a sport. Like martial arts, it's not called martial sport. It's called martial art because it's a continuous process throughout your life. Like if you go to China, you see the sort of the 105-year-old man or woman doing Tai Chi.
Sensei.
Yeah, like 6 in the morning. It's like, that's
a beautiful thing, and I do agree with you there. Then the art is definitely the way forward. It is an art, and it's a never-ending art. And I think it's also the discipline within the art, and also I think at a certain stage, if you're looking at martial arts most martial arts, and I say most, around the 6th dan, tend to not encourage everybody to get into what we call combat or competition after that period of time, because now it's about the nurturing of their mind, isn't it? It's about taking it to the next level, and that's where I suppose your strategies definitely help in getting people out of their business, where they run on, probably running around picking the hammer and trying to hammer the nails in themselves as well.
Yeah.
And I've always found, and this is what I've learned over the years, that there's certain psychometric profiles for individuals that can be relied upon for you to ensure that you've got the right man, right job. So principally, if you find, I'm sure some of our listeners may be happy or even unhappy within business, and maybe they're at a point where they're thinking, what do I do next, and how do I manage to go one stage further? For me, when I've been in those situations, because yes, I have, in certain companies, one has to stop back and get themselves out of the business and start looking in on it as though it's not their business, and then they'll realize that the job roles that the then managing director, could be yourself, doesn't want to do are probably the key areas that are bringing the person down. So then in context, they would engage somebody like yourself to assist them to find the right person, or alternatively, they look within their organization or their friends and family, and they find the right person who likes those particular chores. For example, a calculative type individual, somebody who likes to have a neat, tidy desk, is process driven, wants to complete their tasks, doesn't necessarily want to be disturbed when they're doing the tasks, or isn't really the chatterbox, is probably a very good person to have doing your bookkeeping, to do your accounts, to be a legal body for you. And then somebody who's a bit more of a sensitive stability type person, who is very good at mediating between people, keeps their eye on the detail as well, is flexible, and always looks for solutions, probably a very good person to have within HR. And then you've got the I, the influencing type person, who is very comfortable outselling, but not necessarily into any of the detail. And what we have is kind of got the magpie approach, where if they see something shinier, they'll just jump ship and do that. They could be sitting there trying to complete a task, and somebody says to them, "We're to a party tonight," and they'll go there.
That sounds like the entrepreneur gene. A little
and
bit.
That person is basically what we call an I, and it makes a great salesperson, is what you're saying.
Sure.
And then you've got the D for dominant type person, where these people are goal-driven. They tend to not to be very sensitive. They tend not to look at your needs. They tend to look at their own needs only. So if they're having a conversation with somebody, it has to be goal-driven. Is there a value in this for me? If not, then why am I on the call? Why am I even helping somebody? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And they make brilliant managing directors. So this is of a great philosophy called DISC profiling, DISC. When you use something like that kind of a psychometric, and you grade the people around you, and including yourself, you get some massive clarities. This has been very core to my organizational growth, to find the right people for the right job.
Absolutely. And
that's a bit of advice.
Is it smart to start off with profiling yourself and then figuring out what you need?
100%. You should always profile yourself. Earlier on, I had a client of mine. We were just talking. I basically popped in and we had a conversation in one of my offices, and he was basically looking for a new person in the group, in his team. And what he found was he employed 2 people and he kept failing. I mean, the people were not good for the organization. They didn't necessarily do their work very well. So he was basically looking at me and saying, "Sukhi, how can we refine the process of selection for this individual?" But when I sat down and spoke to him, I said to him, "Look, do you ever find that somehow you're employing your clone?" And he kind of giggled and laughed because the epiphany was very strong. And he said, "Oh my God." He said, "I can clearly see that's what I'm doing." And I said, "Well, don't beat yourself up about it. But there's a reason why you're employing your clone. It's because kind of you know what you know. You like what you like. So your parameters within your psychometric are your version of the world, your model of the world. So as far as you're concerned, you're damn good at that. So you can assess people on it, can't you? So you'll attract people who are fitting your same mold, like a clone. The downside is that if you're a high D, which he is, a high D and an I, hasn't got very much eye for detail, then by having another high D or an I isn't necessarily going to further his business. In fact, it'll probably cause more conflict. So he realized, and by the afternoon he'd rewritten a new job role based upon the areas that he knew that he didn't really enjoy. This has been very valuable for me over my years. That's how I've expanded my group very, very quickly for that same reason. So I work within the development environment, and you can sometimes leave very orderly project management type style of people and leave them to continue to do the job even though you're not keeping an eye on it, and they will do everything properly. So it helps you to leverage yourself.
Why do you think there's so many entrepreneurs in the self-development world?
The self-development, are you talking about the self-help, the mindset environment, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, in that space. I usually call it self-growth.
Okay.
Because help sounds like helpless.
Because I think a lot of the people, so my apologies for cutting in there, but a lot of the people in that environment who are the teachers themselves are not necessarily what we call detail people. So they tend to be a DI themselves because they want to stand on stage, they want to deliver the change. So in their world, as a standard trait for a D and an I, their main mission is to make the sale. So even when a person's not entrepreneurial, because entrepreneur is learnable, but it needs nurturing. And even if they're not entrepreneurial, if an individual out there has a higher guard, a higher test ratio, a higher split testing ratio, or, a very high level of results before they can take commitment toward it, they tend to be pushed into being entrepreneurs. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I personally do not believe that it's necessary for you yourself to be the front of house. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the self-help world or the self-growth organizations tend to push you to be the the person in the front, so that you take action, so you get some glory period of time, and ironically, so they get a turnover. But in real terms, I think, like what we do within the boardroom, we specifically nurture the individual to find their own strengths, so they can then identify their weaknesses. And the entrepreneur should be surrounded by a successful team, a supporting team. So then even the person who doesn't want to face the company can happily become a part of somebody else's team and still have a share in the company. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of pairing up that we pride ourselves in doing. So we'd like to help people to really find their niche, helping them strategize their world, not just for anybody else's world, but for themselves.
Right. Because that's the way to do it. I agree 110%, even though that's not physically possible.
It isn't a self-growth world, right?
So just to go back a little bit, so you're 25, you're doing really well, and then at the age of 31, what happens?
Oh, wow. Thank you for asking the question, because I think it could be valuable for a lot of people to understand that even if you're flying high and you're strong and tough, at the end of the day, we are still human beings. I'm a British-born Sikh from Indian heritage. So our key philosophy is that one of our founders, his name is Guru Nanak. Please, this is not a religious conversation. I'm just sharing you with my beliefs and feelings.
Absolutely.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Guru Nanak very clearly says that we're man of one breath. Okay? So if we take a deep breath or take a breath, we're not really sure or confirmed whether we're even going to take the second breath. We may just take just one breath. And it's not a morbid way of thinking. It's actually a very humble way of thinking, of inspiring yourself to be the best you can. Some people would hear the fact that we're a man of one breath and take it as a negative. But for me, it's the most inspiring thing in the world, which means that I've got to do a lot more. I've got to do, more than I possibly think I can. So in 2006, when I was 31 years old, if you're doing the maths, yes, I'm 40. When I was 31 years old, I was going to be 32 that year. Around the July time, I collapsed with hepatitis A. Now, at that particular time, I wasn't aware of this, but I had fought off hepatitis A myself, and I had virtually got to a stage of what we call, run down. My whole body was totally exhausted. But because I'm a driven person, up in the morning, showered, and off I go. I not really thought about my health in that way. I was very driven, and I always got up and managed to do more. Does that make sense?
Right. So you weren't as good to listen to your body.
No, not at all. See, this is the key point, because I was so super driven with growth and everything else, which I think is brilliant, by the way. But I now endeavour to try and add that humility touch to everybody and keep them driven as well. So this is kind of a unique way of my working. So I keep people positive and growing, but I also keep them very humane and very balanced in life, with personal and business life and health and things of that sort of nature as well. So in 2006, I collapsed, and when I collapsed, I had been given 2 hours to live.
Wow.
And luckily, I pulled through, because I was given a blood transfusion, and I managed to it kind of revitalized my living, my life, and my liver was 2.5 times the size it should have been. My left kidney was near giving up ghost as well. So there was a lot of things that had gone wrong in my body, which I'd ignored. So at that particular time, as I said to you, I was 8 weeks, when I'd collapsed, I was 8 weeks in hospital and around 13 to 14 months away from my group of companies. So I did lose capital whilst I was in there. I had lost control over one of my companies because of the fact that it was control, meaning I still owned all the company, as absolutely, but the financials were not so good when I get back out. It was not a problem because I'd re-established and we moved on. But the purpose was that I was away for near on a year and a half from my group of companies. And during that time, oddly, I actually had a lot of time to think about things. Does that make sense? I was about a year and a half away from everything. So I contemplated, Erland, that, I basically asked myself some really key questions. What was I actually here to do? What was I doing? And was it what I wanted to do? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And these three questions really inspired me to ask myself a question that, is this all, or should I be doing something next level? Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of an explanation of how I went through this, if I can. And it does involve God.
Sukhi, what's next?
Thank you. I have an inspiration which does involve God. So, again, if any of the viewers and listeners do not believe in God, then please replace the word God with the universe, or even the ether, whatever chooses to them. I'm very happy for that. For me, basically, I had a little personal conversation with myself or with God, and I decided that, is this really what I was supposed to be doing? Was acknowledging or accumulating all that knowledge and wealth and balance within my life all I was supposed to be doing? Or was I gifted that knowledge so that I can actually share the knowledge with others? It could have been that I was actually ignoring the messages that were coming my way, where I should have stopped and possibly adjusted my life to try and help other people as well, because I really do get a buzz and a kick out of helping other people. And in some cases I would have thought, well, I've just come near death, so isn't that really a bad and a negative thing? Well, for me, I count it as a blessing, because what happened is it kind of forced a very high D, a dominant type person like myself, to stop and actually think and listen. Listen to the world, listen to myself, listen to my health, to reevaluate things. And so what I then did is came back, I refocused the businesses, no problem at all, and I started a third division of my group of companies, which is, I suppose you could say, the environment of support. As a Sikh, we call it Seva, which basically means SEWA, which means charity. So what I've done is, it's not charitable in the sense of it's free, but it's a business and it's viable to assist other people to grow their businesses as well. So what I do is, what I learn in my real business, I share within the parallel businesses. So that's kind of what happened in 2006 and where I am today.
And one of the things that you noticed at that point was that you should have built better teams. Am I right?
Team is key. I had a very good team around me, which is why I managed to grow so quickly.
Yeah.
I had family, I had structured, I had employed individuals. I got very, very good.
So you had a great
solid
team
foundation.
when this
I did,
happened.
yes.
You did? Oh, fantastic.
And that's part of the reason why we managed, I think some of the companies managed to survive, because the teams are very orderly and they kept themselves going and very driven. And I think very skilled. Does that make sense? So, but I have, since then, it basically means that you can always refine yourself. You can always be better.
Yeah.
I live every single day to learn. So I had a very good team around myself, and since then it's got better. So it's been a blessing.
So the good old sharpening the saw, as
yes, it is, yeah.
Mr. Stephen Covey. So you view that as a daily process for yourself?
In the sense of focusing myself, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just for your reference, I do use meditation. And for me, meditation and prayer are the same thing, so yes.
What type of meditation do you...
I have a very, very close sister of mine who is world-renowned, and her name is Marie Diamond. Mm-hmm. And I honor a lot of my spiritual learnings and awakenings to her. She was also featured very strongly in the book and the the DVD called The Secret. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Yeah, Marie was in there very much so, and I'm blessed to be a member of the Association of Transformational Leaders, which is a global organization in Europe as well. I'm a member of the steering committee. Well, I was last year, and now I'm a member of the Wisdom Board, where we help and strategize and structure all of the leaders of Europe. That's nearly 50 plus individuals who are very, very effective trainers and teachers. I think the meditation that I use, which I would advise everybody and I use myself, is one of Marie's personal private meditations. And at some stage, if you wish to have a link or a copy of that, I'll speak to her. And I'm quite certain that I can request that we share this with your listeners. So basically, the meditation it's called the Tubes of Light, and it's Marie's product. So yes, absolutely brilliant.
Okay. And is that a guided one?
It is. So you put it on, and she goes through a guiding process in there as well.
So in the world, do you think there is light and darkness, and there's a war going on inside us, but also on Earth, with competing forces? Because there are millionaires that do a lot of evil things, right? And then there are millionaires that do a lot of good things. What's your perspective on that?
I hope to say that I hope that I'm one of the millionaires who keep a positive attitude and are very what we call human based, in the sense of we're good for society and humanity. I'm not sure what the light and dark reference would be, but for myself, I think there's some people who are lost and some people who aren't.
Right.
There are individuals who, I don't believe man and humankind intrinsically is an evil being. I do believe that sometimes people can be misguided. So I suppose that could answer the question. So if there's a tussle, it's not actually a tussle between dark and light. I believe it's a tussle between themselves being guided or not guided, being found or not found. So, I'm a very rigorous man when it comes to business, which you have to be. And you have to be pushy. You have to be not pushy, so you have to be driven and focused with a mission and a goal. But that doesn't stop you from being humane and humanitarian en route. So you definitely can help the world at the same time. There are structures that I've put in place which make my world function. It helps me have a very clear conscience where, as a Sikh, we don't really talk about the seva we do, which is the charity element. But, we keep it private, and I have a structure which I follow very sincerely, which creates change on the planet as well. So I do give back as much as I possibly can, but within an order as well. And it's actually very disciplined.
Yeah.
So I suppose you could say light and dark. Light, I'd suggest you mean being good, and dark meaning maybe not so being good, not being so good.
That's right.
So in that context, being a humble Sikh, I have to suggest something that I do not believe that I have the right or the power to judge anybody. Right. All I can be is be the best human being that I possibly can be. So in my world, I tend not to point the finger. Mm-hmm. I just take responsibility of things. So if I am inspirational to anybody, of which I'm truly, truly humbled, my intention is clearly to be a person, or you should say a light worker, somebody there to physically create goodness on the planet and assist and support. And hopefully if that's inspirational to somebody who may be lost at the time, I hope it's an inspiration for the person to come back on and realize that you can actually make very good, honest money, capital intake, growth by actually helping people. I'm the old, I suppose you could say, the new wave of thinking where you can make good money by helping people help themselves.
Absolutely. And when we wake up in the morning, we are adding some kind of value. You take the metro, you spend money that funds the metro for everybody. You jump over the rails, which some people do here in New York and not that often. You are actually not funding the metro. So when we get up and we're spending money, we're actually distributing our wealth and investing in the different aspects of the world. So when you go to the supermarket and you buy healthy food, which is organic, you're actually funding the industry. And hopefully this podcast reaches as many people as possible, and it is valuable to you. We are. There's a saying that is, you are paid in direct proportion to the value you are creating in the world.
Yeah, I mean, Zig Ziglar said it in a very lovely way. Obviously, this is a paraphrase of ancient philosophy, but the principle is, if you help enough people achieve what they want to achieve in kind, you will achieve your goal as well. So that's kind of a new philosophy, of way of thinking. But there is a place for structured strategy within business, and it's the backbone of business. So it's not just about being. The word I'm looking for is not to lose yourself in just spirituality and let the pendulum slow completely one way. it means that you should be honourable, you should be honest with your business, but you should still be structured and driven. So I think it's the magical balance between both. That's what I'd like to say and share. A lot of people tend to not realize that money is probably one of the most natural things, because most people have the perception that it's a man-made product. I have a perception that anything man has made and created is probably meant to have been created in the first place, because as such I believe in the creation element. So in my world, I'd probably just give a little bit of a conversation around money, if I may. To me, money is, if you look at currency, it's nothing much more than a piece of paper. And paper itself is a combination of cotton and trees, wood. And wood itself is basically a photosynthesis, if I'm correct, of sunlight and other nutrients that happen within the photosynthesis process. So then wood itself is actually, in theory, sunlight, isn't it? So realistically speaking, sunlight is the money, is paper. Paper is sunlight. So I can't see anything much more holistic and balanced than money for trading. And trading itself is just energy, if that's what sunlight is. And in the universe, quantumly, there is no more energy or no less energy than there is already. So it doesn't get produced, it just changes its frequency. It changes its form, its resonance. So in theory, money itself is an abundance, and it's there. And it also has its own journey. If we think we can hold money, the moment we leave this planet, the moment we pass on, the money stays here, doesn't it? So principally, nobody owns money. Only money has its own journey. Where I think I've earned $10 or £10 today, I will end up spending it with somebody for, a bag of water, a bottle of water or something, or a bag of groceries. So it does go around to what you've just said there, where people don't realize that they're actually supporting the metro, which supports individuals within the metro. And it's the same principle with business. At the end of the day, business money, it comes your way if you open your doors to it. If you receive it well, which I've got a process which I train and teach, receive money properly and it will come and become your friend. It will come into your world a little bit better. You treat it well and then you send it on its way, because that's principally what it's going to do anyway.
I was watching a documentary during lunch today. It was called Inequality for All, and it was about a lot of people it was about people with a lot of money, but it was about the disappearing middle class in the US. Yeah,
and the 3% who hold all the wealth. Yeah.
Right. So why do you think this? Where do we have the? My thought about it is that we are heavily programmed by the marketing industry to think of lack, like only one left, only two left. Buy at this price, or it's gone tomorrow, right? So we have a sort of pre-programmed lack mentality from the marketing world. Where do you think the majority of people get their lack thinking from?
I think lack is definitely, without a doubt, coming from the programming of press and media as a whole. But sometimes lack is probably a nice way of putting it, but there's maybe another way of putting it. Maybe time sensitive is a good way of saying it. Because, when you're talking about the lack of something where it's going to be sold today at 12 o'clock is the last sale, that sometimes helps people make a decision. It doesn't necessarily push them into something. It gets them to make the right decision that serves them. So I think basically in my world, it's a balance of understanding your intent behind the elements of lack. I think there's enough of everything in this world, including money and food. So we just need balancing it and needs passing through. Without a doubt, there's an element of the top three having more money than everybody else. But I think that's just because they've been focused on certain elements of their world, which they, rightly so, without any doubt, deserve. And when they get to that stage, to a certain stage, and much the same as Bill Gates clearly and Warren Buffett clearly are, two of the richest men on the planet, they've now become the biggest givers on the planet. So I think you've got to have it. As President Lincoln says very clearly, you can't help the poor by becoming one yourself. So you have to turn around and assist the world by becoming something first. One of my key understandings is I have a quote which has been mentioned in a 2015 calendar with humble blessings, alongside the greats like Martin Luther King, and I'm really, really honoured and blessed that they've taken some of that quotes with them. The principle behind that is that if you want to be something, if you want to help somebody, you must become something first. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So some of the people have become something, and at a certain stage, they may look back and think, well, maybe I can help the world a bit better. But they've accumulated it enough that they can actually can really make a big wave and a change. So everybody has a journey on this planet, in the sense of I think everyone's been destined to be something to the planet. So I think the greats, the multimillionaires, the Carnegies of this world, they've all gone and at some stage created a U-turn of kind of engaging another element of spirituality and the ability to create change. You mentioned Harvecker earlier on. He uses a facility which is called I think he calls it the money bucket. Is that right? And that's been distilled from the philosophy from Carnegie's work, where he calls it I think he calls it the accounts. Does that make sense? I think he calls it a different name in the context. But it's Carnegie's world, and Carnegie was, without a doubt, the richest man on the planet at the time. And he's gone out of his way and created the Texas Library, and he's created some goodness back to the market, to the world, including his institute. So
he actually said that it was more difficult to give the money away than it was to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then he created the philosophy of creating the change by encapsulating it and talking to people like Dr. Napoleon Hill to go and interview people and create the change for people.
Fantastic. Let's talk about your simple business philosophy called Simple. Can you explain that to us?
Well, to be honest with yourself, it's a self-explanatory structure. You need every element of well, I'm not going to go for the acronym for a moment. I'm going to go and explain to you what the real true essence of being simple is.
Yes.
At the end of the day, Simple was a title that was given to me with an acronym because I was helping individuals in a very structured, orderly way. But the reality is that if I go back to Steve Jobs' logic and I share other people's philosophies and names so that you can sort of like focus on what I'm trying to say, people who make complex strategies and structures very complicated and very big and use big words and very complex philosophies, they tend not really to actually understand what they're talking about. So, in my opinion, is that if I make the most complicated philosophies and structures and strategies really simple to digest and understand, so simple that somebody can actually take action with a step-by-step plan, I think that's the true definition or reference to true understanding. Does that make sense? So, in my opinion, I try to make everything I do and say really simple.
I love your metaphor of money. That was amazing. I haven't heard that one before.
Oh, it's my own philosophy and my own work, so I'm hoping you haven't heard it before.
So before we jumped on the call here, we decided to give the listeners a unique opportunity. And it's going to be a competition, guys. But basically, you're going to be able to get a free strategy session with Sukhi here. As you've heard, he's a multimillionaire. He's successful for decades, and it'll be incredibly valuable for you to get access to him. So, what you have to do to get access to Sukhi for that strategy session is that you have to write a review of this podcast, a short, honest review of the podcast. You also have to share it with as many people as possible, and we can actually track that. Plus, you have to write me an email saying why you should be given a session. My email is erlend@mroutsource.com. That is ERLEND@mroutsource.com. This is a unique offer for the MBA program only. The usual price is £250. That is about $450. So there's a lot of value here, and it will take you probably 5 to 10 minutes to actually make that money. So all you have to do is write a honest review of the podcast, share it with as many people as you can, and then email me with the reason why you should be given the strategy session. Now, did I say all that correctly, Sukhi? Is that all?
You said it perfectly.
That's what we agreed upon?
Yeah, absolutely. You twisted my arm, so yes.
How many are we giving away?
To be honest with yourself, and again, it's not the lack strategy. It's probably just about my time principle.
Right.
But I think, to be really honest with yourself, from the sense of the kind of questions you're asking me and the kind of environment and group you have, I think they're very relevant. I can probably put a lot of relevance to the world, and I'll be humbled to share. So I'm actually going to turn around and say to yourself that as long as they're coming via yourself and before the end of this year, that means as long as they're accumulated before the end of this year, and in theory, if it comes post January, that would be down to your discretion.
Right.
If they get queued up before the end of this year,
right,
then I will not put an upper limit on it.
Right. So I think the podcast will come out close to the end of the year. So I think we should give people a little bit more time. Let's say the 15th of January.
Perfect. I fully, humbly understand that, yes. 15th of January is actually perfect. So 2 weeks to allow people to get back to yourself to clear, because then thereafter, towards the end of January and early February is when we'll be having these Skype calls.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. And with respect, I think I really trust the fact that your group of people that you're following and talking to are people who want to go and change and create change. And I'm here to try and get those sticky scenarios cleared. I really do make an effort. I work from the heart, and I'm very systemized and process driven as well. So I get the best out of the person for sure.
So guys, you've heard it here. Sukhi Wahiwala has shared everything, not everything, but a lot of things. He's shared everything that I wanted him to share. We could probably keep on going for another 8 hours. Please go to sukhiwahiwala.com and check out his website. There you can get access to the business boardroom. There's also an opportunity to get Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill as a free book, and lots of really good articles on that website. So Sukhi, thank you so much for being on the show.
Honestly, Erlend, I thank you so much for hunting me down, or finding me, whichever way it is, because it's been more than a blessing to share with just such lovely conversation and strategies here. I really sincerely look forward to helping your group and your tribe as a whole, your following at the Hardcore MBA program. So I wish you all the best as well in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This podcast is brought to you by MrOutsource.com. Outsourcing to the Philippines done for you. Mr. Outsource is a recruitment company matching busy entrepreneurs with Filipino virtual assistants, so you can have the time to focus on what's important.